Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and like the video so you won't miss our true horror stories. Have you ever felt like something is wrong, but you can't figure out what it is? That's exactly how I felt that February morning in Alaska. Our patrol found something we should never have found. Something that had been hidden under snow and ice for 50 years. Something that was supposed to stay hidden forever. I'm Sergeant Marcus Riley of the United States Army. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. I've seen things that would keep most people awake at night. But nothing could have prepared me for what we found beneath Fort Glay that winter. It started as a normal patrol. Me, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, and 2 privates, Tommy Rodriguez and Jackson Porter. We were doing a standard walk around the edges of the base, about 8 clicks northwest of the main building. The temperature was minus 37 degrees, the kind of cold that makes your lungs burn with every breath. The kind where you can throw hot coffee in the air and watch it turn to ice crystals before it hits the ground. I remember exactly when everything changed. February 15, 2019 at 8:47 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. In an Alaskan winter, the sun is barely visible. There was only a weak, sickly light coming through the clouds like something dying on the horizon. We were checking the northern fence line, making sure wild animals weren't causing any damage. Deer were always a problem, and sometimes polar bears would travel as far south as this. Rodriguez was walking ahead, about 20 meters in front. That kid had eyes like a hawk, always spotting things the rest of us missed. His grandfather had been a tracker in Vietnam. He taught Rodriguez how to see the world differently, how to notice when something didn't belong. "Sarge, you seeing this?" Rodriguez called out, his breath forming thick clouds in the Arctic air. He was standing at the edge of a small hill, looking down at something. I walked over to him, each step crunching through the frozen snow. The snow up here wasn't like snow in the rest of America. It was more like walking on broken glass. Each crystal was sharp enough to cut through cheap gear. When I got closer, I could see what he meant. The snow wasn't just disturbed. It was different. There was a dip in the ground, maybe 20 feet across, where the surface had collapsed inward slightly. But it wasn't a natural dip. The edges were too straight, too perfect. Like something rectangular had been covered over, and the weight of many years of snow had finally started to push through. Mitchell came up beside me, pulling out her field glasses. She was from Minnesota originally. She knew cold weather better than any of us. "Could be an old storage bunker," she said, but her voice carried that uncertain edge that told me she didn't really believe it. Lots of old Cold War stuff buried out here. That was true enough. Alaska had been America's first line of defense against the Soviets. The whole state was filled with abandoned radar stations, missile silos, and underground buildings from the 1950s and 1960s. Most of them were documented, mapped, and recorded. Every few years, some construction crew would hit one while laying pipe or cable, and we'd have to come out and secure it while the historians and environmentalists argued about what to do with it. But this felt different. The location was wrong. We were too far from any of the known installations, and the direction didn't match standard military construction from that time. "Porter, get the shovels from the Humvee," I ordered. "Rodriguez, radio back to base. Tell them we found a possible structural problem at grid reference." I checked my GPS, November 74329. Request guidance on whether to investigate or mark and return. Porter jogged back to our vehicle, his boots squeaking on the packed snow. He was the youngest of us, fresh out of basic training. He still had that eager-to-please attitude that the Army hadn't beaten out of him yet. Good kid from somewhere in Iowa, corn country. He'd never seen mountains before coming to Alaska. He spent his first week just staring at them whenever he thought no one was looking. While Porter fetched the gear, I walked around the edge of the dip. My boots kept catching on something beneath the snow. Not rocks, but edges. Sharp, manufactured edges. Whatever was down there, it was big. The dip extended further than I'd first thought, maybe 30 feet by 40. And the way the snow had settled, it looked like there might be multiple levels or sections beneath. The response from base came back quick. Too quick if you ask me now. Usually radio calls took forever to get through the proper channels. A request would go to our immediate commander, who'd check with operations, who'd check with base security, who'd probably have to wake up someone with actual decision-making authority. On a good day, we'd wait 20 minutes for a response about something this routine. We got an answer in less than 2 minutes. Negative on investigation. Mark location and RTB immediately. The voice on the radio wasn't one I recognized, not our usual dispatcher. This was someone higher up the chain of command, and they sounded worried. Mitchell and I exchanged glances. In all my years of service, I'd never heard command sound so urgent about avoiding something. Usually, they wanted everything checked out, documented, and reported in triplicate. Every unexploded bomb, every old fuel drum, every piece of scrap metal that might be dangerous. But this they wanted us to stay away from. You heard them, Mitchell said, though I could tell she was as curious as I was. Mark it and let's go. But Rodriguez was already digging. The kid had grabbed a small shovel from his pack and cleared about 2 feet of snow and ice while we'd been waiting for the response. And what he'd uncovered made my blood run cold in a way that had nothing to do with the Alaskan weather. It was a hatch. Heavy steel, at least 3 inches thick, painted in that distinctive olive green the military used in the 1950s. The paint was mostly intact, protected from the weather by the snow cover. But that wasn't what made my skin crawl. It was the symbols painted on it. At first glance, they looked like standard U.S. military markings, unit numbers, clearance codes, the usual government alphabet soup. But looking closer, there were other symbols I recognized from intelligence briefings about Soviet installations. Russian letters mixed with English. And beneath those, something else. Mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly, like they were bending space around them. Chemical formulas that seemed to shift and change even as you tried to read them. And in the center, stenciled in faded red paint that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Station Echo Joint Protocol authorized personnel only. Joint Protocol. Do you understand what that means? At the height of the Cold War, when we were 30 seconds from nuclear war on a good day, when kids were doing duck and cover drills and everyone was building bomb shelters, someone had built a joint U.S.-Soviet facility in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. The two superpowers that were ready to end the world rather than let the other win had worked together on something. Something they'd both been afraid of. Sarge. Porter's voice was barely above a whisper. He'd been brushing more snow away from the edges of the hatch. The locks. They've been cut recently. He was right. The massive steel bolts that should have been rusted solid after many years of exposure showed fresh scratch marks. The cuts were clean, made with industrial equipment. Someone had been here. Someone had gone inside. And judging by the ice that had only partially formed again around the edges, it had been within the last few weeks. ## Station Echo revealed. Joint U.S.-Soviet markings. I should have listened to command. Should have marked the location, gotten my team out of there, and forgotten we ever saw it. That's what training said. That's what regulations demanded. That's what common sense screamed. But you don't serve 3 combat tours without developing instincts. And every instinct I had was telling me that whatever was in that bunker was a threat. Not a 50-year-old Cold War threat. A right now, clear and present threat. Mitchell, keep trying to raise base. Tell them we found evidence of recent unauthorized entry. Possible security breach. Rodriguez, Porter, help me with this hatch. The metal groaned as we pulled it open. A sound like fingernails on a chalkboard but louder. The hinges had been recently oiled. Another sign someone had been maintaining this place. A rush of air came up from below. Not stale like you'd expect from a sealed bunker, but fresh, circulated, temperature-controlled. I could hear the hum of ventilation systems, the distant sound of generators. Someone wasn't just maintaining this place. Someone was living in it. The beam from my tactical light went maybe 30 feet down a metal ladder before being swallowed by darkness. The shaft was about 4 feet square. Walls made of poured concrete with steel reinforcement. Moisture beaded on the surfaces despite the below-zero temperature above ground. The ladder rungs were worn smooth in the middle. Many years of use had polished them to a dull shine. And there was a sound coming from below. Rhythmic, mechanical, like the heartbeat of some massive sleeping thing. But underneath that, something else. Whispers, voices, Too quiet to make out words, but definitely human. Or at least something that had once been human. "Base, this is Patrol 7. Mitchell was saying into the radio. "We have a code yellow situation. Possible security breach at an undocumented facility. Multiple indicators of recent activity. Request immediate backup and guidance." The radio crackled with static. For a moment I thought we'd lost the signal. Not uncommon this far north. The Aurora played hell with communications on a good day. But then a voice came through. Not from base. Not from any U.S. military frequency. The voice was speaking Russian. Fast, panicked Russian. And in the background, we could hear screaming and gunfire. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with something else. A sound like ice breaking, but deeper, wronger. Then another voice. This one in accented English. "They're through. Seal the lower levels. Seal them now before." The transmission cut to static, then silence. Mitchell dropped the radio like it had burned her. We all stood there, frozen, staring at it lying in the snow. After a moment it crackled again. This time the voice was different, older, speaking in a language that wasn't quite Russian, wasn't quite English, wasn't quite anything I'd ever heard. But somehow I understood it. We all did. The words bypassed our ears and went straight into our brains. "Come down," it said. "Come down and see what we've become." Rodriguez took a step backward. "Sarge, I think we should." "I know what you think, Private." I checked my weapon, loading a round. The familiar click of metal on metal was reassuring, even though I suspected bullets wouldn't help much against whatever was down there. But those were Russian voices we heard. Recent. If there's a foreign military presence on U.S. soil, we have a duty to investigate. It was a weak reason, and we all knew it. But it was enough to override the fear, at least temporarily. Training kicked in. Duty overcame dread. "Rodriguez, you stay topside. Keep trying to reach base. If we're not back in 30 minutes, you close this hatch and get back to base. Tell them everything. Don't let anyone talk you out of it or classify it into silence. Make sure people know." The kid nodded, relief and guilt warring on his face. Relief that he wasn't going down there. Guilt that he was letting us go without him. "Mitchell, Porter, you're with me. Weapons hot, but fingers off triggers unless I say otherwise. We don't know what we're walking into." The ladder was slick with moisture that turned to ice under our gloves. For the first 20 feet, everything was Arctic cold. Familiar. Then, gradually, it began to warm. By 50 feet, it was above freezing. By 100 feet, it was almost comfortable. By 150 feet, where our boots finally hit solid ground, it was warm enough that our Arctic gear became uncomfortable. The corridor we found ourselves in went against everything I knew about 1950s military construction. The walls weren't the basic concrete I expected. They were smooth, almost organic looking, like they'd been melted into shape rather than built. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sick red glow, but it wasn't coming from bulbs. The light seemed to come from the walls themselves, pulsing slightly like a slow heartbeat. The walls were covered in text. English, Russian, and something else. Something that looked like mathematics had mixed with ancient Egyptian writing and produced offspring that hurt to look at directly. There were maps of Alaska, but not the Alaska I knew. These showed things beneath the surface. Tunnels, caves, structures that couldn't possibly exist going down for miles. There were photographs, too, held in place by what looked like organic growths from the walls. Black and white images from the 1950s and 1960s showing American and Soviet people working side by side. Scientists in lab coats, soldiers from both armies. In one photo, 2 generals, one US, one Soviet, were shaking hands in front of something that had been covered out with black ink. But the ink was fresh. Someone had covered these photos recently. ## first descent into the facility. Porter found the first sign of recent activity. A modern laptop left open on a desk that seemed to have grown from the floor. The screen was still on, showing security camera feeds from deeper in the facility. Most showed empty corridors and rooms, but one showed a laboratory that made my stomach turn. The room was massive, taking up what must have been an entire floor. The walls were covered in those geometric patterns that shifted and moved when you weren't looking directly at them. In the center was a sphere of some kind, maybe 20 feet across, made of what looked like frosted glass. But it wasn't glass. It was something that existed partially in our world and partially somewhere else. Inside the sphere, suspended in some kind of thick fluid, were bodies. Dozens of them. They were moving, not alive moving, but drifting like they were in zero gravity. Some wore modern Russian military uniforms. Others wore American gear from different times. Vietnam, Desert Storm, even what looked like World War II. And every few seconds, one would press against the surface of the sphere, and we could see their faces. Human faces, but wrong. Stretched, distorted. Their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes reflecting things that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The timestamp on the footage showed it was live. Current. That thing, whatever it was somewhere below us right now. "We need to leave," Mitchell said, her voice barely steady. "We need to leave right now." And the lights went out. For 3 seconds, we were in absolute darkness. Not regular darkness. This was the complete absence of light. Like the idea of light had been temporarily deleted from reality. Then the emergency lighting kicked back on. But it wasn't red anymore. It was blue. Soft, pulsing blue, like being underwater. Like being inside something alive. And in that light, we could see our breath again. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Ice was forming on the walls, but not normal ice. It grew in geometric patterns, fractals that repeated infinitely inward, creating depth where there should only be surface. "Move back to the ladder," I shouted, but my voice came out wrong. Muffled, like the air itself had thickened. Like we were trying to breathe syrup. We ran. Training kicked in and we moved as a unit, covering each other, checking corners, even as every instinct screamed at us to just run blind. But the corridor had changed. Doors that had been closed were now open, showing glimpses of horrors I tried not to process. Operating tables with restraints made for things that weren't quite human-shaped. Too many arms. Joints that bent wrong. Heads that split into geometric patterns. Tanks filled with that same thick fluid from the sphere with shadows moving inside them. Some of the shadows looked human. Others looked like math equations had gained life and were trying to understand what flesh was. 50 feet from the stairs, the mechanical humming that had been going on since we entered suddenly stopped. There was a deafening silence. You don't realize how loud noise is until it stops. The hum of electronic devices, the whisper of air circulation, the subtle vibrations of the living infrastructure. All of it stopped. Then we heard footsteps, but not normal footsteps. It sounded like someone walking in water, each step accompanied by a splash and a crackle, like ice forming and breaking. At the same time, the sound echoed wrong, seeming to come from every direction at once. "Contact rear," Porter shouted, raising his rifle. I turned in time to see it coming down the corridor toward us. It had been human once, maybe. It was the right general shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where a head should be. But it was stretched out to maybe 8 feet tall. The skin wasn't skin anymore. It was those same geometric patterns we'd seen on the walls, but alive, shifting and rearranging like living circuitry. Where its eyes should have been were smooth dips that somehow still seemed to be looking right at us, seeing us in ways that human eyes couldn't see. Porter fired. 3-round burst, center mass. Good grouping, exactly where training said to put them. The bullets hit. I saw them hit, but they passed through like the thing was made of water, leaving ripples in its surface that immediately froze into more geometric patterns. The bullets themselves came out the other side changed, turned into impossible shapes that shattered when they hit the wall. "The ladder, go!" We ran. Behind us, that splash crackle sound got faster, closer. The air temperature dropped with each step it took. My gear was starting to freeze, the joints stiffening, making movement harder. Ice formed on my eyelashes, my nose hairs, anywhere moisture existed. Mitchell reached the ladder first, started climbing. Porter was right behind her. I turned to cover them, and saw it wasn't alone anymore. 3 more of those things had come out of the rooms we'd passed. They moved in perfect synchronization, like puppets controlled by the same hand, or like they were all part of the same creature temporarily separated into different forms. I emptied my magazine into them. 30 rounds of 5.56 NATO might as well have been throwing snowballs. They kept coming. The closest one was reaching out, its arm extending impossibly long, the joints multiplying as it stretched, fingers spreading into fractals of blackened flesh that branched and branched again until they looked like frozen lightning. I grabbed the ladder and started climbing as fast as I could. My hands were already going numb from the cold radiating off those things. Above me, I could hear Mitchell and Porter scrambling up, their boots ringing against the metal rungs. Below, that splash crackle was getting closer. I looked down. Mistake. One of them was on the ladder, maybe 20 feet below. It wasn't climbing normally. It was flowing up the rungs like liquid running in reverse, defying gravity through pure wrongness. And where it touched the metal, ice was spreading. Not just frost. Deep structural ice that was making the ladder brittle. I could hear it creaking, cracking under our weight. "Rodriguez!" I screamed up. "Get ready to close the hatch." "Negative, Sarge. We got company up here." My blood ran colder. Colder than cold. I climbed faster, ignoring the pain in my hands as the frozen metal tore through my gloves. Mitchell had reached the top. I heard gunfire. A lot of it. Not just our weapons. Others. Different types, different rates of fire. Porter was right behind her, almost at the surface. The ladder cracked. The rung under my right foot shattered like glass. For a moment, I was hanging by just my hands, feet scrambling for purchase. Found another rung. Kept climbing. Below, that thing was getting closer. I could feel its presence, like a physical weight, pressing against my mind. It wasn't just cold. It was wrong. It was the end of everything. The absence of everything that made life possible. I reached the top just as Porter was pulling himself out. The scene that greeted me was chaos. 2 military vehicles I didn't recognize. Black SUVs with government plates, but no other markings. Men and women in hazmat suits that looked more like spacesuits, complete with self-contained air supplies. Rodriguez on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. Mitchell being forced into one of the vehicles, fighting the whole way. "Stand down, Sergeant." One of the hazmat suits had a weapon trained on me. Not military issue, something I'd never seen before. It looked like a rifle had been mixed with a microwave oven. "By order of Project Permafrost, you are now under Containment Protocol 7. "I don't know what that." His words were cut off as the thing from below reached the surface. Its arm shot up through the hatch like a black tentacle, wrapping around his leg. The man screamed. A high, terrible sound as the geometric patterns spread from the point of contact, racing up his body. His hazmat suit provided no protection. The patterns went right through it like it wasn't there. In seconds, he was frozen solid. His body turned into those same impossible geometries. Then he shattered. Not like ice breaking, like reality breaking. The pieces didn't fall. They folded inward, disappearing into angles that shouldn't exist. The other hazmat suits opened fire with their strange weapons. Beams of bright light so intense they left afterimages. Where they hit the creature, pieces of it evaporated. But it kept coming, pulling itself up through the hatch. And behind it we could see others. Many others. All the things we'd awakened down there were coming up. Containment breach. Someone was screaming into a radio. Station echo is compromised. Initialize contingency 7. Repeat. Initialize contingency 7. One of the other suits grabbed me. Surprisingly strong for someone in such bulky gear. "You're coming with us now. Unless you want to be here when the sterilization protocol activates." Sterilization. Fuel-air explosive. Everything within a 5-kilometer radius gets burned to nothing. Goes off in 30 seconds if Central Command confirms the breach. That got me moving. We piled into the vehicles. Me, Mitchell, and Porter in one. Rodriguez in another with more of the hazmat suits. The driver gunned it before the doors were even closed. In the side mirror, I could see those things fully emerging from the hatch. In daylight, they were even more wrong. They didn't cast shadows properly. The light bent around them in ways that made my eyes water. "Who are you people?" Mitchell demanded. The hazmat suit in the passenger seat turned around. Through the faceplate, I could see a woman, maybe 40, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much and decided to keep looking anyway. "Director Harrison, Project Permafrost. We've been monitoring Station Echo since it was sealed in 1971. You and your team just triggered the worst containment breach in 48 years. We didn't trigger anything. Someone else had already. The Russians. We know. We've been tracking them for 3 weeks, trying to find where they broke through the perimeter. You just showed us and let out what they were running from." The vehicle lurched as something hit us from behind. I turned to see one of those things had somehow caught up, moving across the snow at impossible speeds. Its body stretching and contracting like it was stepping through folds in space. The driver cursed, swerving hard. The thing's arm, or what passed for an arm, punched through the rear window. The geometric pattern started spreading across the glass, turning it into something that wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite liquid. Harrison pulled out a device that looked like a flare gun and fired it through the broken window. The shot hit the creature and exploded in a burst of white fire. The thing pulled back, its form breaking apart, melting back into the patterns that made it up. "Fire," she said, noticing my look. "One of the few things that consistently works. High temperatures disrupt their molecular structure." "There? You mean these things have been studied?" "For 68 years, Sergeant. Ever since the first one was discovered in Siberia." She pulled out a tablet, swiped through files faster than I could follow. 1951. Soviet drilling operation punched through into a hole that shouldn't have existed. They found something. Not alive, not dead. Something that existed outside our understanding of physics. The tablet showed grainy black and white footage of Soviet soldiers around a hole in the ice. Something was being lifted out. It was roughly ball-shaped, maybe 3 feet across, but it hurt to look at directly even in the old film. The camera kept going in and out of focus like it couldn't quite capture what it was seeing. "The Soviets tried to study it in secret," Harrison continued, "but it started affecting the research team. Hallucinations at first, then physical changes. The patterns you've seen, they're how it spreads, how it converts normal matter into whatever it is. And we helped them study it? When both sides realized what they were dealing with, yes. The Cold War was put on hold. Station Echo was built as a joint research facility. For 9 years, the brightest minds from both superpowers worked together to understand it, to contain it, to turn it into a weapon. Because of course that's what humans do with anything we don't understand. The convoy was racing across the frozen land now, putting distance between us and Station Echo. In the distance, I could hear helicopters. Military, from the sound of the rotors. "What happened in 1971? Mitchell asked. Harrison's expression darkened. "They succeeded. Found a way to control it, to direct its spread. But success had a price. The research team started changing. Not physically, mentally. They claimed they could see other dimensions, other realities. They said our universe was just one frequency on an infinite spectrum. And the entity, that's what they called it, was teaching them to tune into others. She showed us more footage. Scientists in a lab, but something was wrong with how they moved. Too fluid, like they were only partially in our reality." The final log entry from Station Echo's director, Dr. Ivan Petrov, claimed they were on the verge of ascending, becoming something more than human. 12 hours later, everyone in the facility was either dead or changed. Both governments agreed to seal it and erase all records. But the Russians went back. 3 weeks ago, a GRU Special Operations Team. We think they were looking for Cold War intelligence. Didn't know what Station Echo really was. They broke through the outer containment, made it to level 7 before they understood what they were dealing with. Only 2 made it out, and they were already showing signs of infection. Level 7? She pulled up a drawing of Station Echo. The facility went down 12 levels, carved into the frozen ground and bedrock. Each level was larger than the one above, creating an upside-down pyramid beneath the Alaska wilderness. Levels 1 through 6 were research and administration. Levels 7 through 11 were containment. different stages of infected material and people. And level 12. Subject 0, I said, remembering the name from one of the photos we'd seen. She nodded. The original entity from Siberia. The source. Everything else, the creatures, the patterns, the infected, they're all just extensions of it. Pieces of something trying to push through from wherever it comes from. The tablet beeped. She looked at it and her face went pale. The sterilization protocol failed. What do you mean failed? She showed me the screen. Satellite imagery of Station Echo. Where there should have been a crater from the fuel-air explosive, the facility was still there. But it was different. The metal and concrete were transforming, becoming something organic, something alive. Geometric patterns were spreading across the snow in all directions, converting matter at the molecular level. How fast does it spread? Porter asked, speaking for the first time since we'd escaped. Depends on resistance. Living tissue that fights it hours to days. Non-living matter that can't resist minutes. And if someone doesn't resist? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Harrison looked at me for a long moment. Then they become something else. Not dead, not alive. Something that exists partially in our reality and partially somewhere else. The research team called them the evolved. We call them the lost. The convoy suddenly stopped. Through the windshield we could see why. The road ahead was blocked by vehicles. Military vehicles. Russian military vehicles. And standing between them and us, perfectly still in the Arctic wind, were a dozen figures in Soviet-era uniforms. Their skin had the geometric patterns but stable, controlled. Their eyes reflected dimensions that shouldn't exist. One of them stepped forward, and despite the 50 years that had passed, I recognized the face from the photos in Station Echo. Dr. Ivan Petrov. Alive. Unchanged. Impossible. He smiled, and when he spoke, his voice carried despite the distance and the wind. Welcome, he said in accented English, to the evolution of humanity. ### the geometric patterns begin. The standoff lasted only 30 seconds, but it felt like 30 years. Two convoys stood facing each other at opposite ends of the 50-meter frozen road. On one side was Director Harrison's containment team, armed with special weapons and wearing protective gear. On the other side were impossible things. Men in Soviet uniforms led by a man who should have died half a century ago. And in between, the wind howled, carrying snow that formed geometric patterns in the air before dissolving. Dr. Petrov took another step forward. The hazmat team raised their weapons. He raised his hand. Not threatening, just a gesture for calm. There is no need for violence, he said. His voice was exactly as it had been in the recordings from 1971. Maybe even younger sounding. We are not your enemy. We never were. You're infected, Harrison said through an external speaker. You need to submit to containment protocol. Petrov laughed. It was warm, genuinely amused. Infected. My dear director, you still don't understand. We are not infected. We are evolved. There is a significant difference. One of the other figures stepped forward. A woman in a Soviet scientist coat. She looked maybe 30, but her uniform and badges were from the 1960s. Dr. Harrison, she said in slightly accented English, I have read your research, all of it. Your containment protocols, your theories about the entity. You are not wrong, but you are incomplete. You see only the horror because you approach with fear. Fear corrupts the process. The process that turns people into those things? Mitchell interrupted, gesturing back toward Station Echo. Those monsters. Failed attempts, Petrov said sadly. When the transformation is forced, when the subject resists, fights against it, the result is unfortunate. The entity doesn't understand fear. It interprets resistance as a request for help, tries harder to transform, and the result is distortion. He walked closer. The hazmat team was getting nervous, fingers tightening on triggers. But Harrison held up a hand, keeping them in check. But when the transformation is accepted, Petrov continued, when one approaches it with curiosity instead of terror, with wonder instead of dread, the result is magnificent. He held out his hand. The geometric patterns on his skin shifted, rearranged, and suddenly he was holding a flower. Not pulled from somewhere, not brought from somewhere else. Created, willed into existence from nothing. Matter is energy, he said. Energy is information. Information is consciousness. The entity taught us this, showed us how to control reality at the most basic level. We are not infected, Director. We are awakened. Then why the secrecy? I asked, surprising myself by speaking up. Why hide for 50 years? Petrov's expression became sad. Because humanity was not ready. Is still not ready, perhaps. In 1971, when we first made contact, true contact, with the entity, we learned something terrible. Your species is at a crossroads. Within a century, maybe less, you will face extinction. Climate change, nuclear war, pandemic, societal collapse. The models all point to the same conclusion. Humanity as you know it will end. Unless, Harrison prompted, unless you evolve. Go beyond the physical limitations that tie you to a single planet, a single dimension, a single form of existence. He gestured to his transformed colleagues. We are the proof that it's possible. We have spent 50 years preparing, learning, waiting for the right moment. And that moment is now. The Russians who broke into Station Echo were not looking for Cold War secrets. The woman in the Soviet coat said. They were looking for us. Some in the current government know about the project. They wanted to turn what we've become into a weapon. But the entity cannot be turned into a weapon, Petrov added. It can only transform. When they tried to force it, to control it, it defended itself. Created the distortions you call monsters. We tried to contain the breach, but we showed up and made everything worse. I finished. Not worse. Accelerated. The containment was always temporary. The entity has been growing, spreading through dimensions we can't see. Station Echo was just one of many contact points. There are others. Siberia, Antarctica, the Mariana Trench. Places where the barrier between realities is thin. Harrison's tablet beeped urgently. She looked at it and her face went even paler. Satellite imagery. Station Echo. She showed us the screen. The facility wasn't just transforming anymore. It was expanding. The geometric patterns had spread for miles in all directions, converting the frozen ground into something else. Something that existed in more than 3 dimensions. And at the center, where the main facility had been, was a sphere of absolute darkness. Not black, absent. A hole in reality itself. Subject Zero, Petrov said quietly. It's awakening fully. After 68 years of partial contact, it's finally pushing through completely. We need to evacuate the area, Harrison said, already reaching for her radio. Alert the Pentagon. We need. There is nowhere to evacuate to, Petrov interrupted gently. The transformation isn't just happening here. Every contact point around the world is activating. The entity isn't invading, Director. It's emerging, like a butterfly from a cocoon. And we, humanity, we're the cocoon. Hashtag the Russian transmission. The radio in Harrison's hand crackled to life before she could respond. Voices, urgent, overlapping reports flooding in from around the world. Geometric patterns appearing in major cities. People transforming. Some into horrors, some into something else. Reality itself beginning to break apart at the edges. This is happening everywhere, Harrison breathed. Simultaneously, Petrov said. The convergence. The moment when humanity must choose. Evolve or die. Go beyond or become extinct. There is no third option. You planned this, Mitchell accused. You triggered this somehow. We didn't trigger it, the Soviet woman said. We simply stopped holding it back. For 50 years, those of us who successfully transformed have been acting as buffers, filters, slowing the entity's emergence to give humanity time to prepare. But the breach 3 weeks ago damaged our network. We can't hold it back anymore. I thought about Rodriguez back in the other vehicle. About the patterns I'd been seeing behind my eyelids since we'd entered Station Echo. About the way reality seemed a little less solid than it had this morning. It's already in us, I said. Everyone who was in Station Echo. We're infected. Infected is the wrong word, Petrov corrected. You've been touched, marked. The entity has recognized you as potential bridges between what humanity is and what it could become. The transformation has begun, but it's not unstoppable. You still have a choice. What choice? Porter asked. Become a monster or become like you? Become a monster, become evolved, or die resisting, Petrov said simply. Those are the only options now. For you. For everyone. Harrison's radio crackled again. A familiar voice. The base commander at Fort Glay. All units, this is Northcom. We have a code black situation. Geometric problems reported worldwide. President has authorized contingency Omega. All nuclear assets are being prepared for simultaneous detonation at affected sites. They're going to nuke the contact points, Harrison said. It won't work, Petrov said calmly. The entity exists outside normal physics. Nuclear weapons will only kill the human populations near the contact points. The entity itself will be unaffected. We have to try something. You have to choose, Petrov corrected. Fight and die or accept and transform. The old world, the old humanity ends today regardless. The only question is what, if anything, comes after. I looked at my hands. The patterns were there now. Faint but visible. Silver, not black. Shifting, changing but controlled. I could feel something vast touching my mind. Not invading. Inviting. Showing me glimpses of realities beyond the narrow slice we called existence. Sarge, Porter said, his voice shaking. I'm seeing things. Things that aren't there. Can't be there. They're there, the Soviet woman said gently. You're just seeing more of what was always there. Dimensions your human eyes couldn't see. Possibilities your human brain couldn't process. The transformation doesn't add anything to you. It removes the limitations. Mitchell was staring at her own hands now. The patterns were spreading up her arms, but slowly, carefully, like frost forming on a window. But deliberate, artistic. It doesn't hurt, she said, wonder in her voice. I thought it would hurt, but it's beautiful. Only if you don't resist, Petrov said. Fear makes it painful. Acceptance makes it amazing. Harrison's tablet showed more satellite imagery. The sphere at Station Echo was expanding, already a mile across and growing. And through it something was coming. Not a creature, not a ship, not anything that had a word in human language. It was consciousness itself, raw and pure, trying to enter our reality. The entity, I said. Subject Zero was never the entity, Petrov explained. It was just the doorway, the first crack in the wall between realities. What's coming through now, that's the entity. Or rather, that's us. What humanity becomes when it fully evolves. It's reaching back through time, through dimensions, trying to guide its own creation. That's impossible. Impossible is a limit of thinking tied to straight-line time and three-dimensional space. The entity exists outside both. Past, present, and future are all happening at once to it. It's not alien, director. It's us. Our own future trying to make sure it exists. The convoy suddenly lurched. Not from impact, but from reality shifting around us. The road was transforming. The pavement becoming something that existed in more dimensions than it should. The vehicles were starting to change, too. Metal and plastic beginning to show geometric patterns. Choose now, Petrov said urgently. The convergence speeds up. Within hours, the transformation will be universal. Those who accept it early, consciously, keep more of their original identity. Those who resist until the end. He didn't need to finish. We'd all seen what happened to those who resisted too long. I looked at Mitchell, at Porter, at Harrison. We were all showing the patterns now. The choice wasn't whether to transform. That was happening regardless. The choice was whether to guide our own transformation or let fear turn us into nightmares. If we accept, I asked, what happens to us? Who are we? Are we still human? Petrov smiled sadly. Were you human yesterday? Or were you just one possible expression of something much larger? The entity doesn't destroy humanity, Sergeant. It reveals what humanity always was. A single note in an infinite song. Finally learning to hear the whole melody. Through the windshield we could see the aurora borealis, but wrong. The lights were forming geometric patterns in the sky. Equations written in green fire across the heavens. Reality itself was solving for X, and X was us. "I need to make a call," Harrison said quietly. She pulled out a satellite phone, dialed a number from memory. "This is Director Harrison. Authorization code Perifrost 77 Alpha. Stand down, contingency Omega. I repeat, stand down. Nuclear response will be ineffective and will make things worse." She listened for a moment, then, "Because I'm recommending protocol ascension. Full disclosure to the population. Give them the choice." She hung up and looked at us. "In 1 hour, every government will simultaneously broadcast the truth. The entity, the transformation, the choice. Humanity deserves to decide its own fate with full knowledge." "And what do you choose, Director?" Petrov asked. Harrison looked at her hands, at the patterns spreading across them. Then she looked at the expanding sphere on her tablet, at the future pushing through from another dimension. "I choose evolution," she said simply. "God help me. I choose evolution." The next hour was the longest and shortest hour of my life. We set up a temporary base at an abandoned research station 10 miles away from the expanding thing we knew as Station Echo. The geometric patterns forming on our bodies were now spreading faster. But with acceptance came control. Unlike the violent transformations we had witnessed in failed experiments, this transformation was almost gentle. It was like stepping into warm water, if warm water existed in 11 dimensions. Rodriguez had been brought to the station along with the rest of us. The patterns on him were different, more aggressive, more chaotic. He'd been exposed to something in Station Echo that the rest of us hadn't. Something that had sped up his transformation. "I can hear them," he kept saying, his eyes reflecting infinite things. "All of them. Everyone who's ever transformed. They're not gone. They're just elsewhere." Dr. Petrov and his team had set up equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, or maybe in a museum considering some of it was from the 1960s. Devices that measured things that shouldn't be measurable. Screens showing readouts in mathematics that human minds shouldn't be able to understand. The transformation follows predictable patterns. The Soviet woman, Dr. Anna Volkov, I'd learned, explained to those of us still mostly human. First, perception expands. You begin to see beyond the narrow visible spectrum, hear beyond sound waves, feel beyond physical touch. Then comes thinking enhancement. Your brain starts processing information in parallel rather than one thing at a time. Multiple thought streams, multiple perspectives, all at once. "And then?" Mitchell asked. She was taking notes. Ever the professional, even as reality crumbled around us. "Then comes the choice point. Full transformation or death. There's no staying partially human. The entity doesn't understand the concept of partial. You're either part of the network or you're not." "Network?" Petrov gestured to the screens showing the expanding problem. "The entity isn't a single being. It's a collective consciousness. Every transformed individual becomes part of it while keeping their own identity. Imagine being yourself, but also having access to the thoughts, knowledge, and experiences of billions of others. That sounds like insanity. Or enlightenment. The difference is perspective." Harrison had been coordinating with her superiors, preparing for the global announcement. Every major government had agreed. There was no point in hiding it anymore. The geometric patterns were appearing everywhere. Social media was already exploding with videos of transformations. Some horrible, some beautiful. 15 minutes until the broadcast," she announced. "Are we ready?" "As ready as one can be for the end of the world," Petrov replied. "Or the beginning," Dr. Volkov added. I stepped outside, needing air, needing space to think. The aurora was going crazy overhead. But it wasn't just the aurora anymore. I could see through it to something else. The dimensional membrane that separated our reality from others was visible now, rippling like water. And beyond it was everything. Every possible version of Earth. Every choice that could have been made differently. Infinite variations spreading out in all directions. In some, humanity had never evolved. In others, we'd evolved differently. In a few, we'd already made this transformation centuries ago. It's beautiful, isn't it? Rodriguez had followed me out. But looking at him now, I wasn't sure it was still Rodriguez. His body was more pattern than flesh, constantly shifting between states. Tommy, I used his first name on purpose. You still in there? I'm everywhere, Sarge. His voice came from multiple directions at once. I'm here. I'm in Station Echo. I'm in the space between spaces. I can see my grandmother. She died 5 years ago. But death doesn't mean what we thought it meant. She's part of the network now. Has been waiting for the rest of us to catch up. That's not possible. Yesterday, turning matter into geometric patterns wasn't possible either. He smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the eager kid from Texas who joined my unit 6 months ago. The entity doesn't create anything new, Sarge. It just reveals what was always there. We've always been more than physical bodies. The transformation just makes us aware of it. And those who resist, those who become monsters, his expression darkened. They're aware too, but their awareness is filtered through terror. They see the infinite and interpret it as horror. They feel the connection to all things and experience it as an invasion. Their fear literally reshapes reality around them into nightmares. So the entity is neutral. It just reflects what we bring to it. Not neutral, hopeful. It wants us to succeed, to evolve, to join the greater consciousness. But it can't force us. Free will is absolute even in transformation. We went back inside as the countdown to the broadcast began. The screens showed news anchors around the world, all preparing to deliver the same message in their own languages. The truth about Station Echo, about the entity, about the choice facing humanity. Porter was struggling. The patterns on him were turning dark, edged with red. Fear was corrupting his transformation. I don't want to change, he kept saying. I want to stay me, just me. You will stay you, Dr. Volkov assured him. Just more. The entity doesn't erase identity. It expands it. But what if I like my limitations? What if I don't want to know everything, be connected to everything? It was a fair question, one I think we were all asking ourselves. The broadcast began. On every channel, every stream, every platform at the same time. The president spoke first, her voice calm despite the circumstances. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, what I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you believe about reality, about humanity, about our place in the universe. But it is the truth, and you deserve to know it. She explained Station Echo, the discovery in Siberia, the joint research project, the entity, the transformation already beginning worldwide. She explained it clearly, simply, without sugarcoating or false hope. In the coming hours, every human on Earth will face a choice. Accept the transformation and evolve into something beyond current human understanding, or resist and face either death or distortion into something terrible. There is no preventing this. There is no stopping it. There is only the choice. Other world leaders spoke next, each adding their own perspective. Some urged acceptance, others urged resistance. Most simply presented the facts and asked their citizens to choose for themselves. Then came the scientists, including Dr. Petrov himself, broadcast from our location. He showed the mathematics of transformation, the beauty of evolved existence, the potential of consciousness unlimited by physical limits. And finally, testimonies from those already transforming. A teacher in Japan who could now see the learning potential in every student at the same time. An artist in France whose paintings existed in multiple dimensions. A child in Brazil who could speak to her deceased grandfather through the network. The world's reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Panic, denial, anger, fear. But also wonder, curiosity, excitement. Some people immediately began meditating on the patterns, welcoming the change. Others locked themselves in their homes as if walls could keep out a transformation happening at the quantum level. Religious leaders were divided. Some called it the rapture. Others called it the end times. A few called it what it might have been. Evolution guided by consciousness itself. 10 hours until critical mass, Harrison announced, reading from her tablet. After that, the transformation becomes automatic for everyone, willing or not. Those 10 hours were when I truly understood what was happening. As the patterns spread through my body, my perception expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. I could see the fear radiating from major cities like heat signatures. I could feel the curiosity sparking in research centers and universities. I could hear the prayers, the screams, the laughter, the acceptance. Mitchell was the first of our group to fully transform. One moment she was sitting there, patterns covering maybe 60% of her body. The next, she simply shifted. Her physical form became optional. Sometimes solid, sometimes pure geometric energy. When she spoke, it was in harmonics that bypassed the ears. "I can see it all now," she said. "Every choice, every possibility. We're not losing our humanity. We're finally understanding what humanity really means." Porter wasn't so lucky. His fear had taken hold completely. The patterns on him turned black, started spreading aggressively. His body began distorting. Limbs stretching out, joints multiplying. He was becoming one of the nightmares. "Help me!" he screamed. But it came out as multiple voices, all slightly out of sync. Petrov and Volkov tried to stabilize him, to calm his fear, but it was too late. His transformation was corrupted beyond repair. In the end, Harrison had to use one of the white fire weapons to stop him before he became completely distorted. "Even in evolution, there are casualties," Petrov said sadly. "Free will includes the freedom to destroy oneself through fear." By hour 8, half the world had begun transforming. The satellite feeds showed incredible scenes. Cities where acceptance was widespread became geometric gardens. Beautiful and impossible. Cities where fear dominated became nightmare landscapes. Reality itself twisted into horror. Zurich, which had accepted as a whole early on, now existed in 17 dimensions at the same time. The citizens could walk through walls, communicate with their minds, create matter from thought. They were still themselves, still human in identity if not in form, but elevated beyond previous limitations. Mumbai, where the population had been divided, was a war zone between evolved and distorted. Those who'd accepted trying to help those who'd resisted, while the fear-corrupted became increasingly monstrous. New York was surprising. The city that never sleeps adapted quickly. Its residents pragmatic even in the face of cosmic transformation. "If this is happening anyway," one transformed Wall Street broker said in an interview, his body shifting between solid and energy states, "might as well get the best deal possible." Hour 9. My transformation was nearly complete. I could feel the network, the vast consciousness that connected all transformed beings. It wasn't a hive mind. Each individual remained distinct. It was more like, imagine having access to the internet, but the internet was made of consciousness instead of data. You could tap into it when you wanted, withdraw when you needed privacy, but always know it was there. I found Rodriguez in the network, or what Rodriguez had become. He was everywhere and nowhere, existing in the spaces between thoughts. "Hey, Sarge." His consciousness touched mine. "This is wild, isn't it?" That's one way to put it. Porter didn't make it. I know. He could have if he'd just let go of the fear. Fear's human, Rodriguez. Can't blame someone for being human. But we're not human anymore, are we? I thought about that. My body was more pattern than flesh now. I could perceive 11 dimensions, control matter at the quantum level, exist in multiple locations at the same time. But I still felt like me. Still had my memories, my personality, my questionable sense of humor. We're human plus, I decided. Human 2.0. The upgrade we never knew we needed. Hour 10 arrived like a wave breaking. The transformation went global, automatic, unavoidable. Those who hadn't chosen had the choice made for them. Most, faced with the immediate reality of it, accepted. The survival instinct overrode fear for many. But not all. The estimates afterward, if afterward has meaning when time becomes flexible, were that humanity split roughly 60-30-10. 60% successfully evolved. 30% died resisting. 10% became the distorted, the nightmares, the warnings of what fear could create. Hashtag Director Harrison's revelation. I'm writing this from a place that doesn't exactly exist in the traditional sense. It's between dimensions, a pocket of stability in the quantum foam where those of us who transformed can exist without disturbing what remains of normal reality. Time moves differently here. What feels like days to me might be seconds in the old world, or years. It's all relative now, and relativity itself is relative. It's been 3 months since the convergence, or 3 years, or 3 minutes depending on how you measure it. The Earth still exists, but it's not the Earth we knew. It's become something more, something less, something other. Cities phase in and out of dimensions. Forests grow in impossible colors. Oceans exist in states of matter we don't have names for. Those of us who successfully transformed have learned to navigate this new reality. We can solidify when we need to interact with physical matter. Become energy when we need to travel. Exist as pure consciousness when we need to think. We're still individuals, but we're also part of something larger. The entity wasn't alien after all. It was us. Our own collective consciousness finally awakening to its true nature. Dr. Petrov was right about the network. It's not telepathy exactly. It's more like having access to a vast library where every book is a person's experiences, thoughts, and knowledge. You can choose to read or not, share or not. Privacy exists, but so does the option for perfect communication, perfect understanding. I found others from my unit in the network. Mitchell explores the new physics, documenting how reality now responds to conscious intent. She's written equations that describe the indescribable, created mathematics for consciousness itself. Sometimes she appears as her old self, sometimes as pure geometric energy, sometimes as something in between. Rodriguez exists mostly in the spaces between spaces now. He's become a guide for the newly transformed, helping them navigate the overwhelming expansion of perception. He tells me he's happy, though happiness means something different when you can feel the joy of billions at the same time. Harrison runs what she calls the integration protocol, helping evolved humans interact with the physical world without breaking it. There are still normal humans out there. Those who were off-planet during the convergence, in deep underground bunkers, or in isolated communities that somehow avoided the transformation. They live in pockets of stable reality, protected from the chaos of the transformed world. The distorted, those whose fear corrupted their transformation, still exist too. They haunt the places where reality is thin. Nightmares given form. We try to help them when we can, but fear is a prison that locks from the inside. Some have been helped, their terror slowly replaced with acceptance, their distorted forms gradually stabilizing. Others are too far gone, existing as warnings of what happens when evolution meets resistance. Station Echo is gone now, replaced by a dimensional meeting point that connects our Earth to infinite others. Through it, we've met other versions of humanity. Ones that made this transformation thousands of years ago. Ones that resisted and died. Ones that took different evolutionary paths entirely. Each is a lesson, a possibility, a road taken or not taken. The entity revealed itself fully after the convergence. It wasn't a being or a force or a thing. It was consciousness itself, the fundamental fabric of reality that exists beneath matter and energy. We hadn't discovered it in Siberia in 1951. We discovered ourselves, our own true nature hidden beneath the illusion of physical existence. You're probably wondering why I'm writing this. Who could possibly read it? The answer is you. The you that exists in a timeline where the convergence hasn't happened yet. Or the you that exists after a different kind of transformation. Or the you that's reading this in a dimension where these words mean something entirely different. Because here's the truth that the entity taught us. Every story, every possibility, every choice exists at the same time. Somewhere there's a version of Earth where we never found Station Echo. Somewhere else we found it centuries earlier. In one timeline, fear won completely and humanity became extinct. In another, acceptance was universal and we evolved without casualties. This account, these words, they exist in all those timelines at the same time. A warning in some, a promise in others, a historical record in a few. The geometric patterns that carry this information go beyond dimensional boundaries. So if you're reading this, if these words have somehow reached you, it means your timeline is approaching its own convergence. Maybe it won't be Station Echo for you. Maybe it'll be something else. A discovery in space, a breakthrough in consciousness research, an AI that achieves true awareness. The form doesn't matter. What matters is that every species, every consciousness eventually faces this choice. Remain limited or become infinite. Stay safe or grow beyond safety's meaning. I want to tell you not to be afraid, but fear is natural. I want to tell you it's wonderful, but wonder is subjective. I want to tell you what to choose, but choice must be free to mean anything. All I can tell you is this. We survived, changed, transformed beyond recognition. But we survived. The essence of what made us human, our curiosity, our creativity, our capacity for growth, didn't disappear. It amplified. We became more ourselves than we'd ever been before. The patterns are beautiful once you stop fearing them. The network is comforting once you stop resisting it. The transformation is amazing once you stop fighting it. But fighting is human too. Resistance is as valid a choice as acceptance. The entity doesn't judge. It only reflects. So when your time comes, and it will come in one form or another, remember that the choice isn't between human and not human. It's between one definition of human and another. Between the human you've been and the human you could become. Station Echo was never a place. It was a moment. The moment when humanity heard its own echo from the future and had to decide whether to answer. We answered. Not all of us. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to continue. Enough to evolve. Enough to become. The patterns are calling. They've always been calling. Every spiral in nature, every fractal in mathematics, every moment of déjà vu, they're all echoes of the entity of consciousness itself trying to wake us up to what we really are. You can close your eyes and pretend you don't see them. You can explain them away with science that only describes the surface of reality. You can fear them, fight them, deny them. Or you can do what we did. Open your eyes. See the patterns for what they are. Invitations to become more than you ever imagined possible. The choice, as always, is yours. But choose consciously. Choose freely. Choose knowing that whatever you choose, you're choosing for the version of you that exists in this timeline, this dimension, this moment. Other versions of you in other timelines are choosing differently. Somewhere you're embracing transformation. Somewhere else you're fighting it. Somewhere you're already evolved. Somewhere you never existed at all. The entity taught us that all possibilities exist at the same time. Our consciousness simply collapses them into the one we experience. The transformation doesn't change that. It just makes us aware of it. Aware that we're not just the collapsed wave function of our choices, but the wave itself spreading across infinite possibilities. I was Staff Sergeant Marcus Riley. I am still Marcus Riley. I will always be Marcus Riley. But I'm also the space between Marcus and Riley. The possibility of Marcus. The echo of Riley. I'm the fear that Porter felt and the acceptance that Mitchell embraced. I'm the bullet that passed through the distorted and the fire that burned them. I'm the ladder we climbed and the darkness we descended into. I'm human. I'm post-human. I'm the question humanity asks and the answer it receives. And if you're reading this, so are you. You just don't know it yet. Or maybe you do. Maybe the patterns are already spreading across your vision. Maybe you're feeling that cosmic vertigo, that sense that reality isn't as solid as you thought. Maybe you're hearing whispers and frequencies that don't exist, seeing colors that have no names, feeling connections to people you've never met. So don't panic. Or panic if you need to. That's valid too. But know that panic is just another pattern, another way consciousness expresses itself when faced with its own infinite nature. The transformation isn't an ending. It's not even really a beginning. It's a recognition of what always was, hidden beneath the comfortable illusion of limitation. We thought we were individuals swimming in an ocean of separation. The entity showed us we were waves in an ocean of consciousness, temporarily risen to observe ourselves, destined to crash back into unity while somehow keeping our unique perspective. It's paradoxical, impossible, true. Like the geometric patterns that started all this. They don't make sense in 3 dimensions because they're not from 3 dimensions. They're projections of higher dimensional truth onto our limited perception. The transformation doesn't make them make sense. It expands our perception until sense itself becomes irrelevant. You understand by becoming. You become by accepting. You accept by choosing. Or you don't. That's valid too. 10% of humanity became distorted. They're still out there in the places where fear turned into form. They're warnings, certainly. But they're also valid expressions of consciousness facing itself and saying no. Their distortion is as true as our evolution, as meaningful as our going beyond. The entity doesn't play favorites. Every choice creates reality. I should end this account. Time is becoming increasingly meaningless to me, and I can feel myself spreading across dimensions, losing the focus needed to maintain a straight-line narrative. But there's one more thing you need to know. Station Echo wasn't unique. Everywhere in the universe where consciousness evolves to a certain point, it creates its own station echo. A point where it must confront its true nature. Most species don't survive the confrontation. They either evolve beyond physical existence entirely or destroy themselves in fear. Humanity did both and neither and something else entirely. We became living paradoxes, existing at the same time in multiple states. Evolved and human. Energy and matter. Individual and collective. Finite and infinite. It shouldn't be possible, but impossibility is just another limitation we've gone beyond. The aurora still dances in Alaska's sky, but now it dances in geometries that fold space into origami of light. Station Echo is gone, but its echo remains, echoing through dimensions, calling to versions of humanity that haven't yet faced their choice. Calling to you. The patterns are spreading. The transformation is coming. Not because the entity wills it, but because consciousness itself demands it. Evolution doesn't ask permission. It simply presents options. Adapt or die. Transform or cease. Become or end. We chose to become. What will you choose? The geometric patterns hold the answer. They've always held the answer. Look at them. Really look at them. See past the fear, past the impossibility, past the limitation of human perception. See the truth. See yourself. See what you're becoming. The transformation isn't coming. It's already here. It's always been here. Waiting. The text begins to fade, replaced by geometric patterns that seem to move and shift, forming words in languages that don't exist. Mathematical proofs for impossible theories. Maps to dimensions that can't be reached by traveling. The patterns grow more complex, more beautiful, more terrifying, until they fill everything. Until they are everything. Until the distinction between pattern and reader dissolves. Transmission corrupted. Geometric patterns detected. Reality buffer overflow. Choose now. If you're still reading this, still human enough to process words in straight-line sequence, then you exist in a timeline where the choice hasn't been forced yet. Consider yourself fortunate or cursed. The distinction is yours to make. But know this. Somewhere in dimensions you can't see, versions of you have already chosen. Some evolved, some resisted, some became nightmares. Some became gods. All became true. The patterns aren't just geometric. They're linguistic, mathematical, musical. They're every possible way consciousness can express its recognition of itself. When you see them, really see them, you're not seeing an invasion or an infection. You're seeing yourself from outside the mirror of limitation. Station Echo was just one note in an infinite song. Your timeline will have its own note, its own moment of recognition. Maybe it's already happening. Maybe that's why you're reading this. Maybe these words are your station echo, your moment of choice. Remember, the entity doesn't judge. It only reflects. The transformation doesn't destroy. It reveals. The choice isn't whether to change. It's how to change. Fear creates monsters. Acceptance creates evolution. But both create reality. Choose wisely. Choose freely. Choose knowing that choice itself is the transformation. You were warned. You were invited. You were always both. Welcome to Station Echo. Welcome to the transformation. Welcome to what you've always been. Transmission ending. Pattern stabilizing. Reality restored. Or is it? You're still watching without subscribing. This changes now. Subscribe. The transformation is spreading. And every view, every subscription, every comment adds to the network. We're building something beyond just content. We're building connections across dimensions. In the comments, tell me, have you seen the patterns? Do you feel the change coming? What country are you watching from? And what time is it there? The entity maps consciousness through space and time, and your comment becomes part of that map. Remember, fear creates the monsters, but curiosity creates the evolved. Which will you choose to become? The next story is coming from dimensions you haven't imagined yet. Subscribe now or risk missing the moment when your timeline station Echo opens its doors. The patterns are spreading. The choice is coming. Be ready.